Recently, I rewatched the 2004 movie Anacondas Hunt for the Blood Orchid and came to the stunning realization the sequel might actually be better than the original 1997 Anaconda movie. Now, after rewatching both, I can now say that I think the sequel is actually better. Anacondas has a better storyline as well as characters and cinematography. Perhaps the biggest difference, I think, and found between the two is that Anacondas is more visually appealing than the original. So in this review, I'm going to review and break down this underrated creature feature film. So the first thing I need to point out in both these films, Anaconda and Anacondas, is really the star of the movie is the snake, or the anacondas. Now the green anaconda is the largest snake species to exist on planet Earth today, growing up to around 40 feet long. Now since snakes never stop growing, it's reasonable to expect bigger ones are out there. Now, that said, I think the movie should have gone a different direction and actually used a different snake altogether with this, the titanoboa, which is said to grow up to 60 feet. The titanoboa, it's the largest snake to ever slither planet Earth, and there are reports of snakes from the Amazon being even bigger than this. Now, that said, this snake is considered extinct today, but up until the early 2000s, scientists simply didn't believe that snakes ever grew to the size of titanoboa. That would soon change with a remarkable discovery. In 2002, a Colombian student discovered a fossilized leaf on a visit to a massive coal mine in Carrijon, Colombia. And the find really intrigued scientists as they learned the area had actually once been home to a sprawling jungle. After excavating, archaeologists were astounded as they found giant turtles, giant crocodiles, and some of the first bananas, avocados, and bean plants that ever sprouted on planet Earth. With all this, though, they found one stunning thing, and that was a massive vertebrae. A vertebrae too big to belong to any jungle snake on record. And it was really an incredible find and remarkable at the time. Diggers immediately began combing the mines for more fragments of the jungle. And over the next few years, the team found the remains of 28 enormous serpents and 3 skull fragments. And to me, going in the direction around one of these titanoboa snakes still existing would definitely been a better direction. Coming back to the Anaconda movies, in 1997 the movie Anaconda was released, and in time this film really became a cult classic. And while I think the movie was good for its time, I think it lacked many things Anacondas has. Probably one of the biggest factor here was the story. In Anaconda, a group of filmmakers are essentially hijacked by a snake hunter named Paul Cerrone, played by Jon Voight. I thought it was forced how the characters just all of a sudden changed direction from making a movie about a lost tribe to making a movie about snakes. Now, to me, the characters are really shown to be weak as they allow one man, Paul, to pretty much hijack their mission. Now, in Anacondas, the story's a little bit better. The group needs to travel upriver to get a flower, which could be revolutionary for medicine. And the storyline goes from essentially a group trying to locate this flower to just trying to get out of the jungle alive. We also see how the villain, Dr. Byron, becomes obsessed with trying to reach the flower, even leading him to kill his friends. Probably the biggest reason I thought that Anacondas was a better movie was the film was more visually appealing. I thought the cinematography was better, as well as many of the shots. Rewatching Anaconda, it definitely didn't look as good as Anacondas. Now, in both movies, the special effects weren't great, especially with the snakes, but I do think Anacondas was slightly better. And I will say, back in the 90s when I watched Anaconda, I didn't, for any reason back then, think the effects were just terrible, like a cheesy creature feature movie. Now, Anacondas has one other advantage than Anaconda, and it's that the actors and casting in the film was better. I thought in the sequel it was just all around better. If you remember the original Anaconda, it does feature some well-known actors like Jon Voight, Jennifer Lopez, Ice Cube, and Owen Wilson. However, in the movie, they're not really utilized as well as they should be. There was definitely some bad casting, I think, most notably using Jon Voight as the snake hunter. In addition, both Ice Cube and Jennifer Lopez were really at the beginning of their acting careers and still learning how to act. They were famous singers at the time, or famous rappers. Now, their performances weren't bad by any means. It didn't kill the movie. But in Anacondas, we get Morris Chestnut, Katie Strickland, and Johnny Messner. Chestnut has proved himself to be a great actor over the years, without question, appearing in all sorts of TV and movies. And I think Strickland and Messer, their careers didn't take off definitely as much as people in the first Anaconda film, but I think they were well casted for their roles. They may not. So Messner plays Bill Johnson, a seasoned navigator of the jungle and military man who guides the group up the river. Strickland, she plays a young scientist whose mentor also ends up being the main villain in the movie. Now, in both Anaconda and Anacondas, the groups were not only battling the snakes, but also a human enemy. In Anaconda, it's Jon Voight, or Paul Cerrone, the snake hunter, who persuades the group to help him hunt the giant anaconda. In Anacondas, we have Matthew Marsden, who plays Dr. Jack Bryan, a scientist just obsessed with getting to the Blood Orchid, regardless of the cost. So in comparing the two movies, I actually think Dr. Jack Bryan was a better villain. I never thought Jon Voight was a great fit for the role in Anaconda. He just came across to me as cheesy and not really scary, especially when he kills Carrie, Owen Wilson's love interest. Jack Bryan isn't a great villain by any means, but seeing his obsession for the Blood Orchid drive him toward murder, I think, is a bit better. Now, it's almost impossible to compare the movies without discussing the kill scenes, and I think for the most part, they are around even, with the exception Anaconda has that better final kill scene with Jon Voight being eaten alive by the Anaconda. The effects for this were pretty good based on late 90s standards, and really just the thought of being eaten alive by a snake is terrifying, and we watch him be eaten whole, and then we also watch the Anaconda regurgitate him and spit him out right in front of Jennifer Lopez, and of course Jon Voight winks at her. And if you think back earlier to the original Anaconda movie, Jon Voight talked about the anacondas and them eating, and he showed a scar. So here we learn that Jon Voight has been eaten more than once by the anacondas. Now, I think overall this comparison of these two movies, it's really a situation where Anaconda was better back in the day, but now Anacondas is actually better. When Anaconda arrived in 97, it was really a brand new concept. This idea of these massive killer snakes that could eat a whole person, an adult whole. The audiences loved it, and the acting and story was good enough for it to be successful. Now, when Anacondas came out 7 years later, much of that mystique around anacondas, giant snakes, it was gone. And despite being a better movie, it was just never going to do as well. Now, one other thing I just want to point out is the setting or the location in the film that they chose. I thought it was not necessary for them to move to Borneo from the Amazon. The Amazon, it's the largest rainforest in the world with 2.5 million square miles. of dense, lush green forests. And the biodiversity of this area, it's the highest on Earth by far. It's said there's millions of undiscovered species residing there. And much of the environment, it's yet to be fully explored. Due to the flash flooding, it makes it difficult there to explore it, and really just the sheer size of it. In sum, to me, it seems that massive snakes existing seems more plausible in the Amazon than Borneo. Now, that said, Borneo isn't a terrible pick by any means. It's definitely isolated, but I just think that the Amazon is better. All is said, if you're looking for a fun creature film and haven't seen Anacondas, Blood Orchid, maybe you've seen the original, I'd suggest checking it out. Thanks.